Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Wander in Germany podcast. I'm your host, Leanna Brown, from the Germany travel blog, wanderingermany.com, where I'm helping you plan your trip to Germany like a pro, with a pro. That's me. Now, if you've been following the podcast each week so far, thank you to those of you who have, then you are actually up to speed from the last 2 weeks where I talked all about German hotels and accommodations, from the different kinds and types to what to expect in them, all the way to how they are pretty different from what many Americans are used to. And I did all of that because, well, first, I'm a huge believer that correct expectations of, really anything in life can make or break a situation. But also, I think it's really important to know that things like most hotels don't have AC, or you probably are going to need 2 hotel rooms if you're traveling as a family, so that when you go to actually book a hotel, you know exactly what to look for, so there are no surprises when you arrive because you made an assumption about something. And now that we have all of those things out of the way, you'll actually be surprised at how much easier it will be to actually find a right hotel for you, your budget, and your travel styles. And so now that you've got all of that knowledge from the past 2 episodes, so if you haven't heard those, you can pause this now and go listen to those, then it's actually time to start booking your hotels now. So I thought it'd be helpful to walk you through exactly how I personally search for and book hotels when I travel here in Germany. So first things first, let's talk about when to book hotels. So unless there's an event happening, you can pretty much book things last minute if you need to. I don't advise that, but in general, you'll probably find something if you're wanting to wing things. Usually. And of course, there are some very big buts, and no, I don't mean my own, to that statement. So let's take something like Oktoberfest. Hotel prices absolutely skyrocket in Munich during this time. And not only that, they sell out months in advance. In fact, if you don't have a hotel booked 6 to 8 months before Oktoberfest, you're already behind schedule. Christmas markets can also be a pretty tough time to book hotels. So for example, you probably all know that I live in Regensburg. And here in Regensburg, there's not a huge Altstadt, which is where most tourists want to stay at, especially when they come for the Christmas markets. Hotels can be booked out by summertime for the following Advent season. So for me, if I know I'm traveling somewhere, there's very few reasons to not book as far in advance as possible. Especially since so many places now offer cancellation policies. To me, it's a no-brainer just to book as far out as I know I can. So speaking of booking, I actually personally almost always start with booking.com as my search engine for looking for hotels. And no, this is not a sponsored podcast or anything like that by booking.com. I just personally have been using this platform for several years now, and I really do find it the best starting point when booking most accommodations. Now, the reason why I particularly like booking.com is because there are tons of filters that you can choose from. So you can narrow down preferences specifically to you, your travel styles, your needs, your budget, your dates, so much more. I also know that if a place is listed on booking.com, they are legit. And we can't always say the same for something listed on something like Airbnb. And when I say legit, I mean they're registered, they're paying taxes, they're above board. All right, so within booking.com, I obviously am going to start with my dates and the particular city that I'm looking for accommodation in. Now, if you know a specific part of that specific town that you want to stay in, there's even a map search function that you can zoom into just certain neighborhoods or areas. This is particularly great for, again, going back to that Oktoberfest scenario. Some people say, I want to stay near the Hauptbahnhof, the, train station. So you can zoom into that just to narrow in and filter out that area. So for me, here are the filters that I almost always start with. And then what I do is if I'm not really finding things I want or it seems too limiting, I can always slowly start to remove any of the filters that may seem too restrictive. So the first filter I put in is I never even consider a hotel that has less than an 8 rating on booking.com. Usually I even start with the 9 ratings or above, but depending on the size of the town, my availability dates, how close I am to booking, things like that. I also put in the 8 scores because sometimes just putting in 9 either gives me way too expensive places or there's not enough to choose from. I also put in my budget. Like, there's no point in looking for hotels that are way out of my range if I'm not willing to pay for them. Now, the rest of the filters that I'm going to list that I personally do are going to be extremely dependent on you and your travel styles. So obviously take some of these with a grain of salt, and if they don't work for you, then that's fine too. Okay, I'm actually going to just pull up booking.com right now in front of me to kind of look exactly at the wording so that you know what you can also look for. So for me personally, I prefer to go to booking.com before going to Airbnb. Now, that's not to say that I don't stay at apartment hotels. In fact, that's probably where I stay most of the time, considering I travel most of the time, besides for work stuff, with my family. And I have found that apartment hotels are the best option for my family, particularly here in Germany, when there's not hotels that have, for example, 2 queen beds that can fit us all. So apartment hotels almost are always going to be my option when I book accommodation in Germany. And there is an option for that on booking.com. So under property type, it literally says entire homes and apartments. So I can just click that. Now, if I don't want that, there's also a filter for hotels or hostels. So already you can see that you can drill down pretty quickly. The next thing I usually start with, but then I will take off if it seems too limiting, is the filter for breakfast included, especially if I'm staying at a hotel, not an apartment hotel. I love German breakfasts at hotels. They're huge spreads, the coffee that's included. So I always like to see what has breakfast included as my top preference, but I will remove that if I'm not finding hotels that I want. So those are the ones that I almost always just start with as my baseline. Now, the rest of the filters can be completely dependent on you. There's filters for parking. Like if you are driving and you need a place to park, that can actually be very difficult in some places in Germany. So using that filter could be helpful for you. There's a pets allowed filter. There is wellness filters, pool filters. Obviously, you can see you can filter down what you need for you, your travel style, your needs. And I think that's what I like most about this option is because when people come to my Facebook groups and they say, I'm going to Munich and I need a hotel, where should I stay? And it's like, sure, I have some recommendations, but I don't know you. I don't know your budget, what I'm comfortable staying with. Not a lot of other people might be comfortable with as far as, I'm pretty bare bones when I travel kind of thing. So, it's just really nice that you can filter down to what you want and then use the reviews within booking.com. Yes, I know that's why you came asking in the first place to the Facebook groups because you want real people telling you their reviews. But that's what's really great about the reviews on Booking is you can just use those as well. Yeah, it takes a little bit more time to go through those, but the reality is they're still very reliable for the most part. All right. And one other thing to really note real quick here is, if you listen to my last episodes on accommodation, you know that I'm not 100% against Airbnb, but just ethically, it's not my first choice. But that's not to say that I don't use it in my searches. So I definitely use Airbnb as something to compare to. And if I find something that looks, equally as good on Booking, then I go with that. But yeah, there are some times where I just didn't find what I needed on Booking. So I do go to Airbnb. All right, so let's assume that I really drilled down in booking.com. I put in all my preferences. Maybe I said that I need an AC for that hotel room in August, or that it needs a pool, or that I need breakfast included. If I've done a good job of using all of these filters, then I should get a really good list of hotels that should, keyword being should, work really well for me personally. So then what I start doing is sorting by review ratings, and I just kind of make a list of top 5 of the rated hotels. At this point, I may not even be looking at pictures or descriptions. I'm sometimes just looking at review ratings. Once I have it narrowed down to maybe 5, if I'm feeling very ambitious, maybe 10 hotels, this is when things start to get interesting. This is the point of planning that isn't hard, but it can be tedious. So this is usually when I go grab a glass of wine and just start reading reviews. Now, this is huge, and I'm always shocked at how many people skip this step or like just glance at a few reviews and, willy-nilly book something. Again, if that's your travel style, kudos to you. For me, I'm like, no, I need to make sure that this place is clean. I need to make sure that I'm getting what I'm paying for. I need to know what I'm walking into. Like, that's just me as a traveler, though. So personally, I always start with the worst reviews first, and I take these with a huge grain of salt. But what I am doing is I'm looking for consistencies in other reviews. So if something keeps popping up, then yeah, sure, that could be a red flag. But also what bothers someone else, like, oh my God, it was so unbearable, there was no air conditioning, may not bother you or me. So like I said, I take them with a grain of salt. So by doing this, I should easily begin to narrow down hotels that look like they aren't for me. And before long, I should be quickly left with just a few very highly rated hotels that fit all of my personal travel requirements. And basically, I can just choose between the top ones now. Another thing that I do look for, and I don't think that there's necessarily a filter on this, but when kind of narrowing down my preferences, I do prefer to book hotels that have cancellation policies because, well, #life. And on booking.com, there are a lot of hotels now that offer, free cancellations up until 48 hours ahead of time, or, basically very generous cancellation policies. So while booking.com is great for most hotels, pensions, even apartment hotels, like I said earlier, sometimes it doesn't catch everything. So for example, if I want to stay at a Kinder hotel, those typically won't be on Booking. So I literally have to go to Google and start Googling Germany Kinder hotels and then go from there. Same with maybe some of the smaller mom and pop pensions, but even then there's usually like good, well-rated pensions on booking.com. But things like castle hotels, those can be hit or miss. Some of them are on booking.com, others are not. But since you listened to that episode on the podcast, I believe that was 2 episodes ago, about the different styles of accommodation, then you probably already know if you want to stay at a specific type of lodging. So now it's easy to Google something like, Rhine River Castle Hotels or Garmisch Ferienwohnungs, and you can start, just looking through the Google results to see what is available, at first glance. And honestly, that's pretty much it. While finding hotels in Germany can be tedious or take a lot of time, I don't necessarily find it very overwhelming in the way that maybe like planning an itinerary feels. I think the biggest thing to know that when you're booking hotels in Germany is to go back to last week's episode, just to remember that things like, bed sizes may not be what you are used to in the US, or that there may not be an elevator at this hotel. And as long as you know those things when you are looking at the reviews, when you're looking at the filters, then you shouldn't have very many surprises once you arrive. And honestly, if you have any specific questions about a hotel or you want to, double, triple check on a certain amenity, you can always email the hotel. Now, granted, Germans aren't always the best with emails, so you may or may not get a reply, but that is a good way to just kind of double check yourself if something like AC or how many people are in a room are something that's very important for you. Now, of course, if you do start to feel travel panic and confusion as you're working on booking your hotels, you can always join our Travel in Germany Facebook group and always ask for help. Just search for Wander in Germany when you're in the Facebook groups. And of course, sign up for my newsletter if you want specially curated info and deals straight to your inbox that will help you plan your trip like a pro with a pro. That's me to Germany. And that wraps it up on our accommodation topics. But of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and we will do our best to answer those maybe in like a, maybe in a special end of season, frequently asked questions podcast or something like that. But I always love hearing from you, so please don't hesitate to reach out. So until next time, bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.